I saw gaming as probably the biggest driver of mass adoption of Web3. And one of the mistakes is starting with a token and not a game. Without a compelling loop or core gameplay, there's no incentive structure that will really hold players. Make spending invisible instead of painful. A lot of games, they spend years building, then they rush the launch. We just want to get rid of any complexity and kind of wasted time when it comes to integrating Web3.
Welcome to Builder Minutes. This is a fast-paced interview series spotlighting the people building the future of crypto gaming. Today on Builder Minutes, I'm joined by Michael Sanders, co-founder and chief storyteller at Sequence. Sequence is an all-in-one developer platform for chains, games, and apps that create seamless, scalable Web3 experiences. They've powered over $5.3 billion of transaction volume and have thousands of developers building with Sequence. Michael and I first spoke back in 2023, and a lot has changed since then, not just for Sequence, but for the entire Web3 gaming ecosystem. Since then, Sequence has expanded its product suite, announced major partnerships like Google Cloud's Marketplace, and doubled down on making Web3 invisible, fun, and accessible. Quick disclaimer, I am partnered with Sequence on my show Gaming Daily. They are the official infrastructure provider, and I couldn't be more excited to be working with them. We strive to work with only the best partners, and they've been fantastic to work with. So with that said, Michael, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
Thanks, man, for the warm welcome. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
It's been a minute since our last interview, and since then you've dropped a ton of updates, and Sequence continues to elevate left and right. So I really want to kick us off at a high level. Can you help me understand what Sequence looks like today in 2025 compared to when we last spoke?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, the ethos remains the same about accelerating utility for blockchains for everyone and powering games and applications to build these next generation experiences. So we remain very focused on helping games and apps succeed in Web3 by giving them the on-chain building blocks to build, launch, and scale incredible experiences, games, apps, and various products. And so we offer a full stack and modular developer platform that takes care of everything from onboarding and wallets to payments, marketplaces, blockchain data. And we continue to scale the number of developers and games and apps building with Sequence. And something that we're leaning more into now is really focusing on transforming blockchains into vibrant ecosystems. Because for the last decade, proponents of Web3 have anticipated that blockchain would be as monumental as basically the internet itself, right? Like it is this next generation internet. And we still believe that. But the hard question is no longer can this work? It's more what's it going to take to get us over the tipping point and actually make this a mainstream technology that's ubiquitous, that everyone benefits from? How does crypto and Web3 become an everyday utility for virtually all people? And we think that answer lives above the chains themselves and actually in the application layer. And what we see as the application layer is a unified ecosystem of applications and users that turns raw block space into everyday utility and transforms chains into vibrant ecosystems. So as blockchains become more scalable, the next breakthrough must enhance block utility. In other words, we just got to make blockchains more useful. And this is where the app layer comes in. So at Sequence, our vision for enabling Web3's application layer revolves around one, empowering developers, and two, unifying Web3. And so I can talk a bit about each of this. When we think about empowering developers, it's about what we've already been doing, right? Giving developers the tools to build, launch, and scale Web3 apps and games. Because developers are essential for any blockchain ecosystem to thrive. By helping devs build apps and onboard users into an ecosystem, it grows the user base for all apps in an ecosystem or blockchain, right? And what's also interesting is that demand for one application oftentimes increases demand for a complementary application. Right. It's like theaters in the physical world, they drive business and revenue for nearby restaurants and vice versa, right? And apps do the same, so do games. And so that's how we think about empowering developers, right? And then when we think of how do we unify Web3, this is about solving what we call the triple fragmentation trap. So one, chains are fragmented, wallets are fragmented, and tokens are fragmented. And if you're a user in Web3, like you have experienced this. I mean, if you've spent more than like 1 or 2 days in the ecosystem, you've experienced this. Like when we think of chains, right, there are so many L1s, L2s, and L3s. And ultimately, like every chain is almost like an island because users have a hard time navigating to new chains or bringing spending power to it. And consequently, developers can only target liquidity that exists on a specific chain. So that's a problem. And then wallets are fragmented because you either have universal wallets like MetaMask, that they have high spending power, but they don't work seamlessly in games or apps, and they often break the user journey. So they're difficult for onboarding new users. Or you have embedded wallets, which, they have seamless UX, like one-click sign-ons, but every time you go into a new app, you have to create a new wallet. So it's siloed, you have no spending power in it, it has $0. So these embedded wallets are difficult for monetizing users. And so that's wallet fragmentation. Then when you look at token fragmentation, like there's just a ton of tokens, right? And users need to think about bridges and swaps and like all sorts of shit that just makes it, there's just too much friction, right? Yeah. So with Sequence, we're in fact solving all of these fragmentation problems. So we're ending wallet fragmentation by unifying all wallets. And users should be able to move across apps, games, and chains without creating new wallets every time. And they should be able to access their aggregate purchasing power all in one unified experience. And that means as well that like in-app and cross-app experiences should be seamless. And you can bring your own wallet or you can sign in with your Web2 credentials, but ultimately just like enabling, I think what all of us envision Web3 should feel like via solving wallet fragmentation. And then the next piece is ending chain and token fragmentation with one-click cross-chain payments. So a user should be able to pay with any asset from any wallet on any chain. Yeah. And they should be able to do this in one click. And then that also means that developers can target the full purchasing power of Web3. They can target all tokens across all wallets, across all chains. And so this combination of empowering developers, unifying Web3, and solving the fragmentation, we believe will unlock the application layer that will then transform blockchains into vibrant ecosystems. Because when liquidity flows easily, users can spend more, which means apps monetize earlier so that devs show up and they build more applications in an ecosystem, which leads to more on-chain activity and translates into chains capturing a bigger revenue share. And this model ultimately delivers shared upside for all participants, users, developers, blockchains, and we can create a flywheel that compounds with every rotation. So that's a big focus for what we're doing at Sequence.
I love that. It tracks so much to my perspective and outlook on the space as well. I think like the North Star for me with Web3 is just more people on chain to realize and actualize the benefits of being on chain and the values that crypto offers. So I love that Sequence understands that from like a first principles standpoint. And I want to dive into how you guys are doing that with games specifically, because I'm in the gaming space. Yeah. But before I do, because like there's so much that you guys are doing at the infra and application layer to empower the developers and everything. This year's been a big year for you guys. You've had, I feel like, announcement after announcement, and it's really been incredible to witness and be a part of. I'm just curious, like, has there been a development or an announcement that you've been most excited about or proud of that is kind of fueling this goal?
There have been a lot. I wouldn't say there's one that we're most proud of, but just in combination, many that we're proud of. Like, partnering with Google Cloud was a really big deal for us, which you covered. The fact that we are the sole EVM tools provider to Google Cloud's gaming clients. So working with their game studios, most of which are from Web2, right? They're traditional gaming. And then we've had a lot of partnerships with chains that are focused on games, like Scale, Immutable, Somnia, Monad, Toy Chain, Telos. And then, we work with Arbitrum and Polygon, which are, like general chains, but like a lot of these are like gaming chains. So that's been really, really exciting. Sonium as well. And then just partnering with like various games and empowering various games. And some that just come to mind in large part because they're recent, but like we announced Soul Looter the other day, which is from Dream Owl Studios. This will come out later, so we're announcing it. This game Sparkball, which you may have heard of. It's like a 4v4 sports brawler. and like crazy fun. I'm actually really excited. It's just really fun. Yeah, I think it would like even traditional gamers will love it.
We love Sparkball. I mean,
cool.
when it's live, the Wolves are playing it in the Wolves Discord nonstop. It's one of Sam's favorite games. Yeah, no, so that's awesome. Congrats on that.
Totally, man. And then there's like, yeah, I mean, Toy Chain's really cool because they also make games. Like they have this game Citizen Conflict. They have this game Animate, which I'm super excited about. And then, yeah, there's just like dozens and dozens and dozens more that we're partnering with that we're grateful and excited to be powering these games and helping them achieve success.
Yeah, I love that. So let's talk about the games, right? I really want to hear more about how games are finding success using Sequence. I read some stats in one of the articles regarding around retention and revenue growth. So I'm curious, like, what are some, maybe case studies of games using Sequence?
One case study that just comes to mind is also because it's interesting in that they had a Web 2 version of the game and then they went Web 3. It's called Hunters on Chain. And after they integrated Sequence and went to Web 3, they increased day 30 retention by 4.5 times. And they increased average revenue per user by 7.2x. Those numbers are incredible for game developers. What we see across the board is that Sequence wallets convert to spending at a 2x higher rate than all other wallets. So that's obviously very meaningful if you can double your conversion rate to spend. And then we just reduced integration time into Web3 significantly. Like we'll quote 60%, but in most cases, I actually think it's like 95%. We're reducing like developer integration time because we're trying to provide a really seamless and accessible and powerful developer experience. Like we're constantly thinking about like, how can we accelerate developers? So, just reducing the amount of time it takes for them to integrate Web3 is a big focus for us. There's other like Captain Laserhawk, which is a game by Ubisoft. It's actually a Netflix series. It's pretty cool. And it features like characters from Assassin's Creed, Rayman, Splinter Cell, I think Watch Dogs, basically a whole bunch of like the Ubisoft IP. And they launched with Sequence, they did an NFT launch. They had an in-game marketplace and launchpad powered by Sequence that, supported smooth onboarding and access to these limited edition, what they called Niji Warrior NFTs. And that all sold out in a couple hours. So excited to see how that game evolves. And then Ubisoft has another game with us called Champions Tactics. It's like a PvP tactical role-playing game. They use Sequence's embedded wallets. They use gasless transactions. They use our marketplace solutions. And they were able to significantly increase the secondary marketplace activity. And that creates an additional revenue stream for them, right? Because there's enforced royalties in it. And then they also reduce drop-off significantly by removing wallet friction and allowing players to just onboard in a few clicks using Sequence wallets. And players can connect existing wallets to the game, or they can just create a new one in a couple clicks in the moment. So really just like accelerating onboarding and making it smooth in a secure manner so that games don't experience that drop off that is crushing, right? Like it takes you so much energy to bring someone to just try out your thing. But if they're not in right away, they might abandon your game forever. So onboarding is obviously like really important.
That's amazing. So it sounds like to me, Sequence just has the tools that the games need, right? The wallets, the marketplaces, the gasless transactions. So by integrating with Sequence, they're just able to focus on the game and the go-to-market strategy and building their IP and growing their community and things like that. And they don't really have to worry so much about the back end infra tech side. Is that kind of how you're seeing these chains, apps and games and platforms leverage Sequence, not have to worry about it and get to shipping?
Absolutely, man. I think most game developers, they want to make a fun game, they want to onboard users, and they want to make revenue. And everything that's getting in their way of that is a problem. And so we allow games to enable seamless onboarding in Web3. We allow them to enable seamless monetization through marketplaces and payments. And then we allow them to access the data of the blockchain and serve it to users in real time so that it's like nice and seamless and you don't have these game-breaking experiences, so that ultimately the game devs can focus on ideally what they do best, just making a great game. Because of course, making a game in and of itself is not an easy task, right? Like it requires incredibly thoughtful game design, economy design, retention loops, etc. So we just want to get rid of any complexity and wasted time when it comes to integrating Web3. And so Sequence takes care of that for the devs.
I love that. Michael, can you help me understand, like, what is the, I guess, user journey for someone who is getting signed up or getting onboarded with Sequence? We talked about it can reduce integration time by 60 to 95%, which is amazing. I kind of want to understand how games are getting onboarded to the tools. I know one of the announcements you guys had was Sequence Sidekick, which kind of helps people with no code and kind of get up to speed and walk through getting integrated with Sequence. Like, is it that simple? Are there hurdles that people are coming into from your experience that you've seen? Like, you know, how can games kind of get onboarded and up to speed the fastest to have the success? Or like, what are some of the common pitfalls that you've kind of seen maybe them struggle with and you guys have adapted your tooling to, you know, solve them?
So we're always improving the stack and the developer experience and just in constant communication with our partners, because we might think we've thought of everything, but then a game developer's trying to do something custom and it's not intuitive to them how to do it. So they ask us and we're like, okay, like, let us figure this out, right? And then every time we solve something like that, we can productize it for future devs. Like, you know, people wanting packs, you know, kind of like the ability to just open packs and like how that works on chain. A number of folks asked for that. So we built that and we're deploying it soon. And that's just like one solution. Yeah, you mentioned Sequence Sidekick. So it's a self-hosted backend tool designed to simplify Web3 integration. So that's a valuable sidekick. But if you just think of the average developer's journey, you know, you can go to sequence.xyz, you can click on the builder, and that's a low code developer hub where you can access all of our tools. There's like, you know, 15 of them, and there are templates about how to build things. Like, this is how you integrate a wallet, or this is how you launch an in-game marketplace or a browser marketplace. This is how you connect blockchain data to your game. This is how you enable different logins and customize what logins you want in your game. And, you know, many of these things I'm even describing like custom logins, those are based, the way it's now set up with boilerplates is based on developer feedback. They were just giving us feedback. It was clear, like, oh, it's not intuitive enough to them. So we made it more intuitive. You know, like when you're navigating an iPhone, it's pretty intuitive. Just click, you know how to do it. And we increasingly want to make the Sequence Builder platform that intuitive for developers with the product itself, with our docs, with boilerplates, with demos. So it's constantly evolving and we're always open to feedback.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense because, you know, we have a lot of traditional game studios that may be interested in Web3 or exploring the tech. So if Sequence can be a starting point for them and be their guide to entering into this space and making it less scary. It's like, hey, here's how it works. You don't have to be overwhelmed by the tech. We have the tools for you. We've done it with a ton of partners. Here's what you need. I think that that's a really important role in the space to, like you said, empower these builders and developers to build and bring more people on chain. I want to shift a little bit to like the broader gaming industry and crypto gaming specifically. You know, we've seen a lot of game closures and pivots in 2025. It's been the unfortunate theme of the year. And while, you know, many people are acknowledging that this was somewhat to be expected, we know the success rate in gaming is very low. I'm curious from your perspective, what are some of the mistakes being made and what advice would you give to Web3 games building today?
I'll just agree with you that I don't think it's incredibly anomalous compared to the traditional gaming industry, right? Like the traditional gaming industry has a lot of closures too. It's just, it's hard to make a breakthrough game because it's a competitive space and there is a lot of amazing IP out there, right? In most cases, you have to create something that like just the audience loves and is kind of a step above what's been out there or finds that unique niche that people adore. And oftentimes at the right time, right? Like it's timing plays a big role. But I think some of the mistakes that I've seen are games raising capital to build their alpha version, but not having enough capital to go to market. And so like very simple advice. And I know it sounds so easy and it's so much harder to do, but it's like raise more than you need and bucket money specifically for go to market. Like you need to have that capital because a game that's just an alpha that no one's playing, it's like, it's not worth anything to a lot of investors, right? So then it becomes difficult to raise additional capital, even if the demo is really fun. But obviously if the demo is fun, then it increases your likelihood of being able to find investors that will fund it. But you just need to bake in capital to go to market and get users in the game so that you can have real feedback. I think this one's probably obvious to a lot of people at this point. One of the mistakes is starting with a token and not a game. Like you got to have a game first. Just because like without a compelling loop or core gameplay, there's no incentive structure that will really hold players. And then consequently, if you're not holding players and you're just holding some speculators, they're going to get bored. And then the token's going to drop. And we know the story. It doesn't work. Some games are still like too kind of jargon filled and slow to onboard and like wallet heavy. And that doesn't need to be the case. Like you can use tools like Sequence and solve that, but they still exist, and that's problematic. I think they just over engineer the economy. It's super complex and therefore difficult to understand, and therefore difficult for people to onboard into. Like confusion usually sends people away from games or consumer applications. And then I think a big one is just underestimating retention. I think a lot of focus is in Web3, and for certain reasons, but it's been like focused on hype and drops and launch and token sales and NFT sales. So it's been thinking about acquisition, right? But as a consequence, retention often gets overlooked. And so when you think about that, you really have to design for retention from day one and ask what's going to bring a player back after the first 10 minutes? Or what about after the first 10 days? Whether it's social loops or mastery or collectability or ownership progression, whatever it is, like those loops need to be built into the core, not as like a later patch, at least once the game is like in a playable state. I think that's it. And like just kind of touching back on the go-to-market piece, I think you really got to treat go-to-market like a product. Because a lot of games, they spend years building, then they rush the launch. But instead, it would be ideal to treat distribution, onboarding, and community growth as part of your build cycle. And in fact, like Sequence, we do actually help partners on this through like go-to-market advisory and growth support and co-marketing. But yeah, I just want to empathize with the developers that I know that's very hard to achieve, because like you raise the capital, everyone who raises 2 million, they think they only need 1 million, but then it usually turns out they actually need 4 million. So then they're still building and they're like, shit, I can't go to market. And they get stuck in this place. So that's why we're there to help with some like go-to-market advisory. But yeah, it's certainly not like an easy thing to just, I can say it, but it's harder to implement, of course.
Yeah, I think that's been the case for so many of us who like love this space and are like rooting for these teams and so many of the games, but then see the unfortunate reality that we've been witnessing. One of the big narratives right now is revenue, right? We didn't talk about that. And obviously games need money to survive. Where we're at in Web3 gaming right now, where funding's a little bit tighter and players are more skeptical. I'm curious what your outlook is on how Web3 games can drive real revenue and find that distribution at scale. And what are we still getting wrong as an industry? I think you spoke to it quite a bit, but I'm curious from the revenue and the distribution perspective.
Driving revenue for games, again, this is, I'd say, a broader challenge than just Web3 gaming. And I think Web3 unlocks unique monetization opportunities and revenue opportunities with ownership, with secondary markets, with enforced royalties, and enabling just additional revenue streams via the blockchain. So I guess like some of the mistakes have just been, again, overcomplicating the player journey, whether it's the economy is too confusing or just the onboarding takes too long. Both of those are an overcomplication, and simplification will help a lot. And, like it's pretty obvious, right? But like acquisition comes first, you retain somebody for a bit, and then monetization usually follows that, right? You need to retain them. You need to simplify the experience. Another pitfall is just folks confusing extraction with monetization. I think you and I have seen this a lot. There are a lot of economies that they welcome and entice extractors, right? Because it seems like, oh, I'm going to get rich from this game. But if that's the value proposition, then those coming to the experience are just trying to take their riches away from it. And then therefore there won't be a sustainable economy. It'll collapse because there's just too many extractors. So I think, again, it comes down to like a really engaging loop, like a core loop that keeps players there for the long time. Because then if you have like a thriving ecosystem of players, you can welcome some speculators, and some speculation is good, and it actually makes the economy and the ecosystem even more healthy. You just have the right balance between like players and speculators and investors. Simple tactical things folks can do is simplifying onboarding, simplifying how you market and communicate the game, and simplify the game loop on the inside so it's easy for players to follow. And you can add complexity later depending on the kind of game it is. And then 2 is to make spending invisible instead of painful. Like you can have primary markets, secondary markets. With Sequence, you can like enforce royalties into the marketplace infrastructure. You could create liquidity mechanisms as well that turn in-game assets into dynamic, tradable economic systems, like, perhaps lending or like guild kind of interoperability. There's a lot of creativity that can be unlocked through the blockchain and Web3 game design. But yeah, I think that's what I would say about revenue.
I think you hit a really good point that we in the space don't talk enough about. And I guess like as an outside observer, I just assume that the games are doing naturally in terms of, acquisition and then retention and monetization, and really optimizing that flow and those loops and looking at where the fall off is. That is like the science and art of game design. And this isn't all games, but it has been the case for some games where I go into the game and, things are either broken or not optimized, or the FTUI is not that great. And that initial experience, like we kind of talked about a lot here, kind of turns you off to the game, and it doesn't really incentivize you to stay and then to spend. And I think like the experiences that I've enjoyed the most has been where user journey and experience is just super smooth, seamless, and optimized. I think of like Off the Grid, like I still pay for their battle pass, I'll transact on the marketplace. These on-chain experiences have so much to offer, but yes, it still feels like a lot of clunkiness is in the way. It feels cliche to say, but it feels like we are in the early stages still. I think that my general outlook on the space has always been in terms of like a decade or decades. I think, this revolutionary tech is going to take a lot of time, right? I think that we all saw like the promise of Amazon in, 2009, 2010, 2011, but like it took until 2014, 2018, the pandemic 2020 for like Amazon, to be ubiquitous and undeniable at the level that it was, where it's just was obvious, right? There was a time when people didn't want to put their credit cards into Amazon or online. Right. And now it's like Amazon Prime gets delivered every day. So I feel like that's kind of where we're at with this on-chain adoption and journey. And I love that Sequence is building for the long term and building the tools and serving the developers and the builders that are coming into these waters and testing them out.
You raise a really good point. Just like the initial fun, right? Game developers want to give someone an aha moment. I'm just thinking about when I was a kid playing like NBA Hang Time on N64, just being able to see like, oh, I can pick my players. Like what players am I going to pick? That's when I'm like, oh, I'm in, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you just got to give somebody that like engagement, like that hook as fast as you can. And then they'll be there, and then you can layer in all sorts of complexity later. You just got to get them doing the thing. Yeah, in terms of, we are early for sure. Like the first generation was kind of like Axie Infinity. That was the first generation, like $1 billion of revenue. And it was like less than a year. It's like super fast. That was like the first generation. And we've seen kind of the second generation, but we haven't even gone through the full cycle of these generations yet, right? Like there's some projects that are stealth building with Sequence right now that are from like legendary game producers and designers. And I'm just like, okay, like I have very high confidence that these folks know how to create something incredible. I mean, I know they do. And I have very high confidence that they're going to be able to bring it to Web3 in a super compelling way. Obviously, not every game succeeds, so you still need to have many shots on goal. But I'm just like, I'm very inspired by what's coming. And I know there have been shutdowns and like games going out of business, but that's part of any market cycle. And we all know the .com bust, right? Like the crash, like, 95% of those companies got wiped out, but then what emerged was the cream of the crop. And now, this time later, I mean, you mentioned Amazon, right? There's Google, there's like all of the juggernauts of today's market were born in that era. And similarly, it's going to happen with Web3 and with Web3 gaming. I still believe it will revolutionize the internet and it will become ubiquitous. The way you say that we were hesitant, or people were hesitant to put their credit cards into Amazon, there are many people today that are very apprehensive about interacting with crypto. But 10 years from now, 15 years from now, like stablecoin adoption, liquidity flow, cross-border, all this stuff, like it's going to be kids growing up who are not going to have the same baggage associated with digital money, like it's going to be very intuitive to them. Like it will be ubiquitous in, you know, whether it's a decade or two, I'm not exactly sure, but it will be. So I think we're all building towards that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more with that thesis, and also the inspiration that you get from the builders that are building. That's one of the things that I hang my hat on. When I look at all Paul Bettner or a Koji or a Chandler from Sparkball, and, you know, a Michael from Sequence, and just the people building this technology and also building the games and trying to innovate, it's just so exciting and it's inspiring on that cutting edge. So tell me, Michael, like what's next for Sequence, right? What does the rest of 2025 look like?
Largely focused on, you know, empowering games and apps and enabling a thriving application layer, just making it easy for devs to build, providing the on-chain infrastructure that unifies chains, developers, and users into cohesive ecosystems so that we can just have the experience we all envision. And there will be a lot more upcoming partnerships, both games, chains, and other ecosystem partnerships that we'll announce throughout the year. Hopefully we'll be partnering with you on them to cover those. And always evolving our product roadmap. Like we have new evolution of our ecosystem wallets and one-click cross-chain payments coming out, in addition to always like improving on the marketplaces and the onboarding. And we'll be at various events throughout the year. So we'll be at Permissionless. I'll be there, a few other teammates. I think some of our team will be at NFT NYC, ETHCC, Token 2049 later this year. And yeah, we're going to continue to be a sponsor of Gaming Daily, so folks should tune in every single day. I do. I watch it every day. So yeah, man, that's what we have on the agenda for the rest of 2025.
I so appreciate that, Michael. As someone who is also trying to, you know, build for the future and also build for the people that are here right now, it's just an honor to be building alongside you. You know, we go back to the Gamers' Choice Awards. You guys were one of the sponsors there, and that meant the world to me. And it means the world to me that you guys are supporting Gaming Daily, that you believe in what I'm doing and see the vision and are here working with the builders and the creators. And you guys have been here nonstop. I really appreciate and respect that legacy and that resume and that track record. What's the best way, Michael, for someone to learn more or inquire about Sequence? Is it booking a demo and going through the tooling? Like, how does someone get started? If someone was listening to this and, you know, was like, I want to learn more, like what's the next step?
Yeah. Sequence.xyz. And then depending on who you are, there's different paths, right? Like if you want to start building right away, you can just click start building. That'll onboard you into the Sequence Builder, which is a developer portal, low code. So you can just get started. If you want to talk with our BD team, our sales team, you absolutely can. You can contact if you just, you know, want to learn more and you kind of want some hand holding. Absolutely. We also have our Discord community where there's good discussion. You can chat with some of our team in addition to other developers and also just users in the space. There's various forums, and then there's docs and templates and all sorts of resources that you can leverage, and video content, etc. But sequence.xyz is definitely like the starting point.
Fantastic. Michael, thank you so much for joining us for Builder Minutes.
Thank you so much for having me, IC. I appreciate it.